Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We're Talking Movies. And we're here today reviewing a little slice of 2007 with Trick or Treat. Now, Cade, we recently watched this movie, and this is a movie that we're both big fans of. So, what are your biggest pros for this movie?
I think one of my biggest pros is definitely how it utilizes the concept of intertwining stories. Because if you look back, we have the whole storyline of Principal Wilkins, who's secretly a serial killer. There's the story of the young trick-or-treaters exploring the whole legend of the bus massacre. There's the story with Laurie and her friends, who we find out are actually werewolves. And then we also have the storyline that focuses on Sam Krieg, who we find out is the bus driver from the massacre. Yeah, I love how the movie connects all these different stories together. I like seeing all the different characters converge at certain points in the story, and I especially like how it all comes full circle at the end.
Yeah, it really does. And that's actually something I'm also a very big fan of. Is usually if you see an anthology movie, they're not as connected as this is. So I really like how they managed to spin all these five separate short stories, how they cross over and intertwine with each other. My favorite example is actually just the very last shot of the movie where, Sam's finishing up with Mr. Krieg, kind of watching him hand out candy, make sure he's behaving. But you also see Rhonda walking away with her jack-o'-lantern in her wagon. You see Laurie and her friends driving away in their car. You see the grumpy robot from the beginning of the movie coming back home. It's a well-connected anthology film, and I love that.
Yeah, and actually, just out of curiosity, out of all the storylines that we saw in the movie, did you have a favorite?
Ooh, that is a really good question.
Because mine was probably the one that followed Rhonda and the other kids as they visit the quarry. I really liked learning the whole legend of the school bus massacre, which happened many years prior on Halloween. I like how it started out as a prank, but then it evolved into the real thing when we see the ghosts emerge from the quarry. So, yeah, that was probably my favorite storyline. It felt the creepiest, and I think it had the most detail to it.
I think I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I think that's probably my favorite of the five. I think it's like you said, it's the most detailed. I think it's definitely the scariest, though I do really love basically all five of the little stories in this movie. I think the even story is the funniest, just of the interaction of his kid shouting at him through the window while he's desperately trying to bury a body. I think the one between Mr. Krieg and Sam is probably the most intense, with just how it's shot and just the very close up on the body horror. But just I really do like them all. I do have to bring up a couple of my favorite pros in this movie, and that is number one is just how much Halloween stuff is stuffed into this movie. They just stuff as much Halloween as you can into this movie. Think about it. You got shopping for costumes, you got trick or treating, you got carving jack o' lanterns, you got local urban legends. It's just so much in one movie. And then another one is just how many classic horror motifs you've also got stuffed in this movie. Think about it. You got ghosts, you got werewolves, you got kind of sort of demons, depending on what you consider Sam as. You got serial killers. No matter what you like in horror, there's something here for you to like.
Yeah, and I think adding on to what you were saying about how much Halloween stuff is included into the movie, one thing that I absolutely love about the film is definitely the atmosphere. I think the production and set design in this movie was just fantastic. I really enjoyed, like you said, all the Halloween decorations that we saw across the town. I think some of the main locations in the film were really great. For example, Sam Krieg's house, I think that was a standout. The quarry, like I mentioned earlier, was a standout. Yeah, the atmosphere, in my opinion, is definitely just really well put together. And I credit the team behind the movie for what they accomplished with it.
And I back that 100%. I also need to give a huge shout out to the practical effects in this movie. I think for a movie that had a relatively small budget, practical effects in this movie look fantastic. The werewolves look great, Sam looks great, all of the stabbing and the body horror looks really good. The ghost kids from the bus massacre, I like how they kind of look like a cross between ghosts and like waterlogged zombies. Yeah, just really good practical effects. And if anybody knows anything about me on this series, is that I'm a sucker for really good practical effects.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing to add to that, adding on to what I was saying about the atmosphere of this movie, another thing I do want to highlight is I think the movie has pretty good cinematography. Now, the director of photography on this movie is Glenn McPherson. For anyone who doesn't know, he's also worked on movies like Rambo from 2008 and The Final Destination. He did a really good job shooting the film. Again, while the production design and the art direction are both still great, I think the cinematography was also a really nice touch and it brought a lot of life to it as well.
Yeah. My last pro I need to talk about is, can we just talk about Sam? What a great design for a horror movie villain, or, well, kind of, sort of villain, but we'll get into that in a second. I think the combination of the baghead mask with like the sewn smile and the footy pajamas was just an instantly iconic look. I love his kind of inspiration for being a killer as this sort of like evil protector of the sacred traditions of Halloween. I think he's got some fun weapons with both like his razor blade and the candy bar and his, the super sharp lollipop he takes a bite out of and kills people with. I don't know. It's just a great addition to the horror movie killer pantheon. Do I think he's one of the absolute greats? No, but I definitely think he's up there.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I liked about Sam as a character, and we talked about this when we were watching it, aside from the fact that he's the one who really links all these different tales together, I also really like how we don't really know too much about Sam's character, like regarding his origin. Sometimes it is nice to see origins or backstories for certain characters, but sometimes I think it's better when they're a complete mystery to us. And that is something that I feel about Sam. I think this movie makes it very clear what Sam's motivation is. He targets people who break Halloween traditions. And with that, as long as we know what his intentions are, I don't necessarily need to know what his backstory is. In fact, I would say that it's a great way to add to the element of the unknown with his character. And if executed properly, it can make him even scarier. And I think that's something that the movie does very well.
Definitely, definitely. This was the right call, not diving into his backstory because they don't reveal where he comes from and what he really is. Again, is he a demon? Is he a ghost? Is he just a monster? Is he this weird, like, guardian spirit of Halloween? Like, absolutely the right decision to not go too deep into the details on this one. All right. Well, that should just about wrap up the pros we have. And again, we do really like this movie, so we had quite a few of them. Not so many cons, but Kate, I know we do have a couple. So do you want to bring up what you have first?
Sure. So my biggest con with this movie is probably the werewolf storyline. Now, let me explain. Just in my opinion, this is probably the weakest storyline that's interwoven into the story. Now, I'm not saying that I think it's bad. I actually really like how there is a twist at the end when we discover that Laurie and her friends are secretly werewolves. That being said, I've just never really found the overall storyline as interesting as the other ones, and I've never been as invested in it. So, yeah, that's probably my biggest con with the movie. Again, not saying it's bad or that it ruins the movie. It's just out of all the different storylines that we see intertwined, this one's probably the weakest, in my opinion.
I can definitely see where you're coming from. I'm not as critical of it because I think the twist at the end of it being a pack of wolves, I think kind of saves it. One of my only real cons with this is that as much as I do love this movie, I wouldn't say it's like actually all that scary. I know that's going to sound really counterintuitive, but the only one of the five stories that I found like actually like genuinely scary was the trick or treater storyline about the bus massacre.
Yeah, that is also one of my biggest cons with the movie. I've just never really found this film all that scary, despite the fact that I still really enjoy it. Again, while I think that the movie does have a very eerie atmosphere and there is a decent amount of gore and violence, I don't really find it to be all that scary or disturbing of a film. And who knows, maybe that was the intention, who knows, but it's just a small con for me. And it's never ruined the movie, but every time I go back to it, I think, yeah, I mean, this is good, but I don't really find it that unsettling. And have you ever been disturbed by it at any point?
Well, again, when the ghost kids from the bus massacre first appear, I found that genuinely creepy because again, I just love their design so much. But again, Steven's one, I find that more comedic just because of the ridiculousness of it. And again, the argument he has with his son through the window, I just find that absolutely hilarious. Again, the Mr. Creek and Sam one wasn't so much scary again as it was really just intense, mostly because of how it's shot. The Laurie and her friends, the werewolf story, that was more mysterious. Just hey, why, what are they talking about? Why are they just recruiting these random guys they find on the streets? What is so important about this? And then the couple at the beginning, that one's, that's the bumper, so that's not a super in-depth story to begin with. But, I just, again, the trick-or-treater one is the closest that really got to scaring me again when the ghost kids show up and also all the jack-o'-lanterns start disappearing. But, yeah, no, just not, compared to other horror movies, this one's not really that scary. That does help make it rewatchable, in my opinion, but it's not that scary.
Yeah, I agree. But to close this off, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give this movie?
This is in my opinion, this is an infinitely rewatchable movie that's perfect for this time of year. I gotta give it an 8. I really like this movie. I think it's got some great characters. It's got some great practical effects. Again, it just stuffs as much Halloween into a Halloween movie as it possibly can. And I hear they're making a sequel. I really hope they do it justice. And I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. I hope that they do a good job with it. My score for this movie is probably going to be a 7.5 out of 10. Again, I really like it. It's never been one of my favorite horror films, but I think it's still good enough for me to give it that score.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of We're Talking Movies. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. And happy Halloween.